Clive and Mandy Dunstall. You'll hear more about them as we go along, but I will tell you briefly that Mandy and I got to know each other and were introduced to each other back in 1987 when I was touring with the Continental Singers and Orchestra over in England. And there's a pretty funny story that we might tell you on the way of just our adventures of romping through England together. But anyway, so without further ado, I want to bring on, straight from the UK, Clive and Mandy Dunstall. Clive and Mandy, hello. How are you guys?
Hello.
Thanks for joining me today.
We're good, thank you.
I just want to give an opportunity for you guys really quickly, maybe briefly, to introduce yourselves a bit more formally, and then we will start our conversations and we'll get into the nuts and bolts and maybe the gritty details, Mandy, of our romp around London together. But anyway, introduce yourselves.
Okay, well, he's obviously Clive, and I'm Mandy, and I hope you've got that figured out okay. Yeah, well, we are here in sunny England, and that's a rarity because it's not always sunny, as you all know. But at the moment, we're going through a little mini heat wave, so we're rather warm here. But it's, what time is it? 8:20 at night, and yes. So yeah, it's all good. We're enjoying it.
Slight bit of COVID going on as well.
There is a bit of COVID going on, but you know, it's decreasing. I'm pleased to say. So our numbers are going down, so that's good.
So as you guys know, you know, COVID here is kind of, it ebbs and flows, and we're kind of increasing a little bit in the numbers that they're seeing here in Texas, and you know, we're opening up the state some more, and I think as when they begin to open up the state, of course, that second wave that they're seeing is coming through. So. Well, you know, we just have to be safe and just do what we can just to help not spread and keep care of ourselves. There's really not a whole lot of than that we can do, you know, really. And so 8:20 in England, you know, when I was there, the thing that I noticed is that the sun doesn't go down to what, you guys, in the summertime till what, midnight, maybe? 10
p.m. Yeah, about 10 p.m. or so. Yeah, I think you may have experienced it because the further north you go, obviously, the longer the evenings. And so if you go, last summer actually, I was touring up in right up in the north of England, and yeah, we were getting out 10:30, 11 o'clock. It was still light, and so that's and Scotland, right up in the north of Scotland, it stays light up there too. But down here, we're about 30 miles northwest of London, and so yeah, we
actually north of London, straight up.
We get all right. we get dark about 10 o'clock.
Lesson.
Mandy's lived there a lot longer than I have. So.
Yeah.
No,
but yeah, so but at the moment there's not. It's all very lovely here. It's a bit too hot actually. We can't. We're good at moaning about the weather. You know, if it's raining, we're moaning. But if it's too hot, we're moaning as well.
We're all looking forward to winter, aren't we?
Well, you might be.
You know, you guys should come visit in Texas. You need to do that, by the way. But I would probably recommend that you not come in the middle of the summer because it does get to triple digits here with a lot of humidity. I'm not really sure you'd like that very much. You know, I was
there in probably July or August. I was there in Houston. That would have been 2006. So I have been there. It was hot. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty miserable. Houston, of course, being so close to the coastline, you get a very, very high level of humidity, and it's far enough off the coast that you don't get the breeze from the ocean that you would quite get here in Galveston. So Houston can be pretty steamy, Yeah. So Mandy, I was telling everybody right before you came on that you and I have actually known each other for I think a bit more than 30 years. Believe it or not, it was like back in 1987 when I toured there in the UK. And that was the summer that you and I met each other. And we met each other with the Continental Singers and Orchestra. And you were a part of the British Continental Singers Orchestra, is that right? Or did you did you come in, or were you part of the United States part as well?
I was, yeah. I did my main tour with the Continentals was in 1986, so the summer before, and I toured over there and did a lot of America and Canada and Alaska. Oh, wow. And so and then in the spring of 87, I was part of the European, the British Continentals, and we went over to Scandinavia.
Yes.
And then we met in the summer, didn't we, of 1987, when you were on the American tour coming over to
the UK, right? Yes, and that was that summer that, and I want to tell this story because I do think it's just a funny story. This about you and my tramp around London together. So, so what ended up happening, guys, and I'll tell you the story. And I'll do it briefly because I want to get to what Mandy and Clive were doing in England. But this is pretty funny. We were over there, and we were there for, I think, Mandy, what was it, about 4 weeks that we toured, England, Scotland, we went to Ireland, and then came back. We were in England and London for the last day to get ready to come back to the United States. So we were going to go and exchange our money back. This is back when you had to exchange your currency.
Yes, absolutely.
So I obviously didn't have much currency left to exchange, and I sure wasn't going to change just a little bit. I was just going to spend it. So I left my passport on the bus so I wouldn't lose it. Hindsight probably should have told me I should have put it in my back pocket or something, because during that day, sure enough, guess what I lose? The passport. Somehow it gets lost on the bus. So that evening, I had to get into town to get my passport renewed to catch a flight back out to the United States the next day. So early that morning, Mandy, I think we were at like a military base or something. So I took the train in to meet you, I believe. And then you and I met each other early that morning, whichever morning it was, there at the train station. And then you and I set off to find the embassy, which proved to not be nearly as easy as what I might thought it would have been. So guys, Mandy and I, we arrive at the embassy. Finally, we find it. Small little door. I think, Clive, you know where it is. You were telling us the other day about where it was. If we had only known Clive back in '87, we could have found the embassy probably 3 hours sooner than we did. So I go there to get the passport renewed. The problem is I started touring when I was 15, so I didn't have any license or anything identification with me other than my passport. So I went to get the passport, and they were questioning me big time about why I was trying to get back out of the country. And they were saying, well, you don't sound American. Where are you from? Well, why are you running around with this little English girl? And why are you trying to exit the country? And I was like, I'm trying to get home, people. I'm trying to get home. But so, Mandy, we ended up, if you remember, running across the street, getting my passport picture taken, running back across the street, putting the passport together. We took off to the tube station down to Heathrow. I get there, and well, folks, the end of the story is I did make it on the plane, right in the nick of time. I got back to New York City.
Close, wasn't it?
It was very
tight,
close.
really tight. But that isn't quite the end of the story, is it, Jason? You've missed the punchline.
Yes. Yeah. Mandy, tell us the punchline, because I think this is the beauty.
Well, yeah, of course. Guess what? When you got back to the States, one of your assistant directors, Kim Bone, who, ironically enough, I toured with the previous year, knocked on your door, didn't she? With something she found, I believe.
She did. I think what she found was my original passport.
That's the one.
So go figure.
So we had all that skate around London for. We didn't need it, but to be fair, we hadn't. I think it turned up in some gig bag, or was it in part of the sound equipment or something? I can't quite remember. But
I'm not sure they ever really wanted to tell me exactly where they found it. The point was it was in Kim Bone's hand at my door at my hotel room at midnight in New York City, and so there I was back with both of my passports. And so, but anyway, a fun story, guys, just to kind of tell you some of the adventures I think that we do have on the road. I mean, you guys both, Mandy, you and Clive both have been on the road and you've toured, and some of the stories that we have from tour are really some of the stories that maintain friendships for a lifetime. Mandy and I have been friends, I guess, ever since. When Facebook hit back up, then of course we made a bit more of a connection because it was just easier. It's easier to do this than it is to be, what is it, the post you had to send letters back and forth. That takes a bit longer to communicate. But anyway, and through that, so I meet Clive, and it's been great. It's lack of words of what it's meant to meet you, Clive, and to get to know you. So tell us a little bit about yourself as well. I mean, what's your story?
Right. Okay. So I left school when I was 16, and I joined the Royal Marines Band. So I joined the service. The the military for 8.5 years. So I spent, as soon as my training was 2.5 years at Deal, and I was already playing piano, but I had to learn to play a marching band instrument, so I learned to play trumpet.
Yes.
Quickly, very quickly, yeah. 2.5 years, I got my grade 8, yeah.
Wow.
And then I went, yeah, it was, yeah. And then...
you can't march with a piano, apparently.
Ironically, the first thing I was presented with, after 2.5 years, I joined my first band, which is a band called Flag Officer 3rd Flotilla, which is a band that used to go on all the big military ships, all the aircraft carriers. So imagine me as an 18-year-old boy, green as the hills, getting onto an aircraft carrier, and the first thing I get given is a pair of cymbals because it was a small band. So I'd spent all this time learning trumpet and piano solidly for 2.5 years amongst all the other military training, and then I'm given a pair of cymbals. And I'm only telling you this because the first place I went was on HMS Hermes, and we went to New York. And one of the gigs I did in New York was I played in Shea Stadium. So I've actually played in Shea Stadium with a pair of parade cymbals, marching up and down. I've got pictures.
Which is more than maybe Mandy and I have ever done. So this is good.
There you go.
Yeah,
absolutely.
There was no tune though. I managed to get off them in about 3.5. I tried to put all the cymbal crashes in the wrong place, so they realised they didn't want to do it. So unfortunately, because there were 5 cornet players in a small band, one of us had to do it, and I was the new boy. So I did it for 3.5 months until we changed ship, and then I got off it. So after that,
just think about all those cymbal solos you had, though. It was really impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've got all those under my belt, yeah, or above my belt, in fact. So after that, I was in London, based in London, in the Marines band for 3 years. So I was a year and a half off, 3 years. I was posted on the Royal Yacht Britannia, the Queen's Royal Yacht, for a year and a half, and I did a trip again. I went up to America. We went to LA, stayed there for a bit. Did Costa Rica and Barbados and all that before that. Then we went down to Hawaii and Pago, Tonga, Galapagos Islands. Eventually went to Australia, and then we came back.
Was this with the Queen? Was she on board?
The Queen, Prince Philip, Princess Anne,
cool.
Princess Margaret, and Zara and Peter, yeah. So and the Queen Mother, yeah, all at different times. But the main things it was the bicentennial. It was the bicentennial for Australia. That's what we was going out there for, and we did their expo and stuff as well. So it was a 6-month trip. It was a very cosy affair of 27 of us all living in the same room for 6 months.
Not the Queen, she wasn't in there.
No, she wasn't there, no.
she had her own quarters.
She had
I was going to be very impressed. You were a lot closer to the Queen than I realised.
Yeah. Well, she had the rear half of the ship, and the 277 crew had the rest. Yeah. But no, she's very nice. I did meet her and actually talked to her about the Fender Rhodes piano, which I suppose that's a first for most people. I'm not sure she's that into keyboards, but there we go.
You did play sort of cocktail for her in her lounge, didn't you?
I played. We played for all their dinners. I did one dinner when she was called out of the dinner and had to come to her phone in a little office, which was right by where we were playing for the dinner. It's a complete other story, but
these are like the state dinners, aren't
they? State dinners. Yeah, it will basically be that if you've been on the yacht, they're in one end, they're in their dining room, and they shut the doors, and then we're all downstairs, full orchestra or small group, whatever they had that particular night. We would run upstairs. I'd get an upright piano out of the cupboard, or use the Queen Mum's grand piano behind. And we all set up, we'd be in full military uniform, and then they'd open the doors and we'd play. And they couldn't really see us because they were quite a way away. And then as soon as we finished, they shut the doors and we all disappeared again. And then they let them out. So that was a sort of protocol. It was all very, it was all very yacht thing. But anyway, the point was that she was called out, and she went had a phone call, and she came out and said, "Oh, it's a girl, hurrah!" And I think is it Beatrice, the first one? Or Eugenie?
I think it's Beatrice.
It was Andrew's daughter had just been born, and literally we were there when she took the phone calls. So
that
yeah,
is very, very, very cool.
and she said champagne as well, but we didn't get any of that. So
you did get some of Prince Philip's port, though. I think
I did. No, brandy.
Brandy.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think
Well,
I would take that
I
over
did.
the champagne anyway. I was just saying I would take that over the champagne anyway, the port or the brandy.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, it was actually brandy. I don't really drink brandy at all. But the chief steward used to sing Irish songs, and he was doing a little sort of Irish night. We did some really weird things on the yacht. I mean, good funny year. We did like an afternoon fete one Sunday to raise money for charity. We did all sorts of things. It was hilarious. You know, one of the medical officer dressed up as the vicar and his wife. You know, and all sorts of stuff. It was great. We had some really good times in there. But one of the things, they did an Irish night, and they wanted like a sort of an Irish band. So this guy invited me down to write down his songs, things like Liverpool, Whiskey in the Jar, all those sort of type songs. So I wrote them and I arranged them for a small little salon orchestra thing, and so then we played that on the gig that we did, and but he used to, as a payment, you know, everything on ships generally is beer. That's normally payment for everything. That buys everything. But he gave me, because they get given so many presents that they don't have. So I get like chocolates and I had this glass of brandy that he said it was about £60 a glass at the time. That was 1988, and it was because brandy can taste quite sort of make you sort of twitch a bit, but it was like smooth as you like. But so you know, I'm not a big spirits drinker anyway. So, but anyway, there we go.
So I love this story. So Clive was telling us, you know, I'm not really big on drinking, but I only drink brandy with the Prince.
Well, exactly. Yeah. If you get £60 a glass, I don't mind. Yeah, I'll put up with it.
If I'm going to drink the brandy, I'm only going to drink it with the Prince. That's all.
There you go. Yeah, fair enough.
I didn't actually drink it with the Prince. No, he was. I did see him a few times. He was. I met him a couple of times. He was funny actually, and his quips were very funny. Yeah.
Do you know? And I think that's the one thing I've noticed about, you know, just the royal family in general. I think the Queen has a much more wicked sense of humor than one might think. But
she has.
But her children are they're just real people, and particularly her grandchildren just really bring it to a very personal. It's like the guy next door kind of level, which I think is so cool.
She's lovely.
Have evolved, haven't they?
Yeah, she's lovely though.
I think the royal family have evolved quite well, and they've had to, obviously, in the last 20 years. Yeah.
There's a great story I heard about a band leader. I won't mention his name, but he did a gig at the Palace, and he'd got a bottle of champagne and sort of put it under his jacket, you know, to take home, and apparently he dropped the bottle on the floor as the Queen came up to him. And so it was a complete fail. And apparently the Queen says, I think we need to get another bottle for Mr. Yeah, she's got a good sense of humour.
I love that, you know. So one of the things that we'll come back to here in a minute maybe is what the royal family has done for mental health, and just their being so vocal and so open about that. It's made such a difference, I think, not just for the UK, but for the world. And I have so much respect for them in that, well, for all kinds of reasons. But that is one I can say. I have so much respect for what the royal family is doing as far as their promotion of mental health awareness. So maybe, you know, you've had your fair share of really cool experiences too. One of which I think I'm the most, I don't know if proud's the right word, but your role as Carlotta in the Phantom of the Opera. It's one of my favorites, by the way. And then you had an opportunity to sing the role of Carlotta. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I was, when I first went into Phantom in the West End. It was 2002 to 2004, and I was covering the role of Carlotta. And the first time I went on was. I had no notice at all. Usually you have an idea because you know that if they're going on holiday or something. Right. But this time I didn't have any idea at all because the girl literally had thrown up as she was entering the building. So, wow. That was it. And so there wasn't much notice. You know, I had about 2 hours to get ready and so on. And then from then on, played her quite a lot. And she's a great character to play because she's feisty and she's a character. You know, she's not.
Yes. Yes.
There's something to get your teeth into. So yeah, great fun.
On our first one though, you're literally helped, aren't you, by everyone? They throw you around into
places. Because obviously, you know, I mean, that was the first time I'd covered as well, and I wasn't really sure, you know, but you obviously get very familiar when you're rehearsing a role, and you know your plot, and you know when your costume changes are. Right. But when you're covering, you have a rehearsal, obviously, and you have a dress rehearsal, and then it can be left for quite a long time. And for her, there was a lot of costume changes, quick ones, a lot of quick wig changes, you know, all of that kind of thing going on, and you literally had to just stand and be shoved around a bit because it's so specific about, you know, where you have to be at what time and where you have to look at what time. It's very, you know, it's not paint by numbers. That's unfair, but it's very specific, and you have to be on it. And mainly, a lot of that is because of these quick changes, and a lot of the kind of the stage, the backstage crew who you know exactly know what they're doing, even if you don't, and so they know that they've got to be on this very spot. And so you know you need to be there as well, otherwise hard luck, you know.
Yeah, so to hear you talk about that, I think it's something that a lot of people don't really realize. Because when you go to a show like that, for example, when you're sitting in the audience and you're looking up and just and enjoying it, everything just seems so fluid and everything seems so great. You know, but what you're talking about is the behind the scenes part that so many people don't get an opportunity to see, and how difficult it might be. And it shows, I think, the real talent of the people who are doing these things to be able to be taken from one side, rushed over, you know, wig taken off, a wig crammed on you, put on, change, and just shove you right back out, and you're supposed to walk out and, you know, whoa, and sing it again, you know, and how difficult that might be.
It's like a swan, isn't it?
Exactly right. Yeah, swan. It is like a swan, but you know, you're very much the dummy, you know, that just stands there. But I have to say, and you know, pay tribute, as everybody knows, that the crew and the wig department, the costume department, the makeup department, you know, those are the guys, and the backstage crew, sound and lighting, that are making the whole thing work. You know, we're on the surface, and they work so hard, and they're so fantastic at their jobs. You know, and I you know, I think they've got the much harder job, number one, and also I think without, you know, their help, so many people. So when we do go on as covers, there was no announcement or anything, you know. So as far as the audience are concerned, they're seeing Phantom of the Opera. They don't need to know if so and so's covering, you know, because a long run show, there aren't any star names in it particularly. You know, it's just, you know, people just doing the role, and so it's not like they've come to see, I don't know, Glenn Close, you know, in Sunset Boulevard or something. It's not that. So they don't make a big deal of it, and so, you know, you have to be as seamless and as smooth and as swan-like on the top as you can, even though underneath this huge amount of activity and work's going on to make sure that nobody clocks that you don't do 8 shows a week. So yeah, that was a great experience, and it's a real family there. I mean, I'm just very sad at the moment because, of course, they've all been let go in the West End, and
that show is closed. Yeah. It's closed now.
So they're gonna.
That's the first time that show's been closed, I would imagine, in the UK on West End.
30 years.
In what, 30 years? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So 34 years.
34. Yeah.
Still got many friends that are in it, and long-standing, you know, members, not only on stage but also off stage as well.
They're going to redo the building, and obviously the set they didn't expect the set to last more than, you know, a few years, and of course it's been there for 34, so they're doing all that. But the real worry is that they're going to make the cast smaller, the orchestra smaller, everything, you know, cheaper, and
no one knows that yet, but you know,
but that is the worry, what everyone's worried about.
Obviously the arts, I don't know about in the States, but the arts have taken a real bashing over here because, you know, and no support either really at the moment. So, you know, without wanting to be political, it's tough.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think that's the way it is for, you know, for everywhere. You know, for New York, for example, I was just talking a couple of weeks ago to a friend of mine who does Broadway there, and that whole Broadway community is under the same kind of I guess crunch at this moment. There, I mean, there's nobody coming to theaters. There's nobody. You know, they're not open. They can't do it. So they were hoping that they were going to be opening up Broadway again by middle part of July. But, I don't know if that's even still on target or not, because with the second wave of COVID hitting, so it really hits the community very, very hard. It hits the artist hard. It hits the theater goers hard. And as you guys know, you guys are part of this. I mean, this is part of our way as musicians and part of our way as the creative type to really kind of express ourselves, which kind of helps our own selves maintain our own positive mental health sometimes. So when something like COVID comes around and takes that completely away from you, and takes that away from the public, there is a concern there, about how you do it. So you guys have taken, and I know you don't give yourself credit for this, but I give you a little credit for it for sure, of what you guys are doing to continue spreading your talents and your gifts with people in your own community. You're doing a lot of these street concerts. Talk about a little bit about what that's been like for you and what you're doing with that. Did you hear that?
No, sorry.
We lost you a little bit, yeah.
I was just about what you guys are doing with your street concerts and taking your own talents out into your community and continuing that connection with people. Talk a little bit about that and what your experience has been like.
Well, that's been great, actually. And I think, a lot of musicians and singers, have felt really helpless in this whole time. But that's one thing that they have been able to do. And so, we just started these sort of impromptu end of the drive little concerts. And it started off on the 75th anniversary of VE Day, when obviously there was going to be huge celebrations all over the country. And in our village here, we were going to have a big street parties, and there was going to be a show going on that we were involved in, all sorts of things. And then this happened, and then a friend of Clive's, who is a percussionist in an orchestra that Clive works with a lot, had this idea. They started coming out on the Clap for Carers Thursdays, and they happen to live in a street where there's quite a lot of musicians, and so had this idea to put together
not just professional, but
a whole mix, community.
Right.
So they started doing songs. So started doing Somewhere Over the Rainbow and all sorts of things. And then from that, he thought, well, how about, we actually try and do a nationwide concert, a VE Day 75th anniversary concert, where there's a lot of sing-along songs, so a lot of the old
Vera sort of stuff.
War songs, and any sort of positive kind of, yippee, we're glad that we got through the war type thing. They were bringing all those songs back.
Of course.
And so Clive and a couple of other guys did a lot of arrangements for whatever instrument, rhythm section, string, brass, woodwind, etc., etc. So
just so anyone could play the tune, basically.
Anyone. And there was sort of a trickier part and then a simple part, so that children could get involved as well. So that's how it all started, and there was all those charts and tracks made available, and I was singing some on. If some of the streets didn't have singers, then they could just use the voices of myself and another guy, friend of ours, Lance Ellington. So that's how that all started, and it's been good, really. And so just for us, it was just Clive and I at the end of our drive that did our. And
we used
concert.
The tracks that we'd recorded with
and played along, cool. And then we just carried on. We just did that every Thursday. Because our road, just didn't really have anything, and there's a lot of.
We live in a country lane, so the people weren't near us, but we invited them via a sort of group chat to just walk down and socially distance, and they didn't they? Yeah,
and a lot of them could they could hear it fine and see it just about from the end of their driveways, because our road's very windy. It's got lots of trees and hedges and all sorts. So it's not the most, community friendly of roads, and that's not because people aren't friendly. It's just because of the the layout of it.
The layout, yes.
Just one thing. Go on. Sorry, I was just going to say one thing's been great through this is that we didn't know a lot of our neighbours before this, and now we have done, because somebody in the road set up a WhatsApp group, and so then there's been a lot of community spirit, and not just our concerts, but people giving out eggs because they've got chickens, and someone else going to the supermarket and getting stuff for vulnerable people if they're by themselves.
And it's been fantastic.
Oh yeah, yes, and
Scones,
that's right. Another
good.
lady baked a load of scones with cream and jam, which was very English. And so, of course, we had that. She brought a whole tray of those around. So there's been this lovely community spirit, and the music's been very much a part of that, hasn't it? And that's been brilliant. Yeah, I have to say.
Well, don't you think that? I think music then brings people together. I mean, I think that's what we see in the theater department or the theater district. So is that it just brings people together, and when you can be out, do what you're doing. And I've watched a couple of them on Facebook Live. You guys will be doing the live stuff, and I just would sit and just listen and watch. You're even affecting somebody here like halfway across the world from you. Because it was a beautiful thing that you did, that you shared just your community, but with your Facebook community and your friends online as well. And I think music has a way of doing that, guys. And I think that you get that for sure. You guys are musicians. And I think for people who come like to the theaters, they long for that. They long for that connection. You can sing a song or you can hear a song or whatever. It just elicits this emotion, from within that sometimes itself is just healing. And I think it's just beautiful. One of the ones I thought was really, really cool is you guys did, was it a 65th wedding or was it a 75th?
75th
wedding anniversary.
I mean, who married for 75 years is incredible.
Yeah. Who lived 75 years?
Well, but who's married for 75 years?
92 and 96 they were.
But they got married just after VE Day, which was fantastic. So obviously, he'd come back from the war and they got married shortly after that, and they're still.
Story.
The funniest thing was though that the BBC local radio picked it up afterwards, and so they rang this lady, and to be fair, she was not the full cutlery set, was she? She was away with the fairies a little bit.
That's a bit unfair. Well, she was she's
96.
96, right? So she's not quite as sharp as she would have been.
No.
That's what Clive's trying to
say. She was actually on the phone when we played it. When we arrived, we were setting imagine a 14-piece orchestra turns up in front of your block of flats and starts sending up.
Does that always happen?
Yeah. Well, they looked down and she goes, "Oh, it's our 75th anniversary today." And we looked at, "Oh, is it? Oh, really?" And while we're setting up, because you always set up an orchestra in front of a few bins and a park. So
such trashy music, I tell you.
It's the glamour we do it for, isn't it? Yeah.
So funny.
So Mandy eventually gets on the microphone and says, "Actually, this is for you," and she's on the phone to her daughter down in Hastings or somewhere like that, and she just kept talking, didn't she? She just kept talking with her. Anyway, but when she got on the radio later, she said, so the guy on the radio said, "This is amazing." He said, first he said was, "What's it like having an orchestra playing outside your house?" And she goes, "My sister." And she's talking about your sister. So she was completely off in another planet.
Well, it was almost answering the question before, wasn't it? But, that's okay.
But then she said, "Well, what's it like being married 75 years? What's the secret?" And she goes, "Well," says, "it's not all good, And then she started going on, didn't she?
She said, "Anybody that tells you that they can be happily married for this long is a liar." She said, "Because it's difficult sometimes." She said, "But I just." But then the Welsh we always end up working it out. It's fine, But she said it's and then she said when he gets cross with me, he starts swearing at me in Welsh, and I think assuming he is Welsh.
He is Welsh.
And that's good to know.
I understand everything he's saying, but I don't think he realises that. But I know exactly what he's saying.
No, he says when he sometimes swears at me in Welsh, and I know what he's saying. That's funny. She was surprised.
Great characters,
Because Welsh is one of those languages. I'm not sure if you're Welsh, you're never going to understand what they're saying. It's very different, isn't it?
Tricky. They're trying to keep it alive because it's been it's been dwindling. There's many schools in Wales that now will still just teach in Welsh, and you have to learn that, and that's their first language because they want to keep it alive. Because Cornish has pretty much disappeared, and all these ancient languages. So.
Right. What is it that I heard about? Only about 200,000 people speak Welsh still in the world, and they're all in Wales. And of course there's the two dialects, the northern and the southern part of it. So I'm glad to hear that they're still kind of keeping that alive. What is the Gaelic? Is Gaelic still going pretty strong in Ireland? Are they still teaching that there? Or?
actually.
There's Gaelic football. There is.
But then it's the Gaelic language is
the
still.
language is the Gaelic language still going.
You'd probably be able to find. Well, we could always Google it. But yeah, I mean, all these languages. Obviously, as the world gets smaller, you know, and people, and then a lot of these languages and even dialects start to dwindle, don't they? Yeah,
they do. Texans are still very going good and strong, though, guys. I'm telling you, Texans.
There you go. Well, Texas
Texan language.
It's a little country, nay, mini world in itself, isn't it?
It is.
Yes.
No.
Well, that's so fun, guys. You know, so Clive, you also had an experience to come to New York, and you played with Sting and his American Synchronicity tour. How long ago was that? That was back in
2006.
8. No, hang on.
2000?
No, we got married in 2006.
No, 2010.
2010.
Yeah, when Monty was born. Yeah, sorry, 10 years ago. 10 years ago. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
You didn't think I was going to test you guys on dates today, did you?
Oh, it's very hard. We did 78 concerts, America and Canada, and also Europe. We did it in 2 sort of chunks. I had one of these. It's one of these odd phone calls that you get sometimes. I was in Waitrose. Supermarket, yeah. Yes. And the manager of the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra rang me and said, we've had this gig come in with this pop artist. You might not know him. He's called Sting. Would you be up for it? And I nearly fell into the meat counter. You know, I mean, he's one of my heroes. So
you might not know him, by the way, though, right?
Yeah, they would do it. Yeah, doing chicken breast 3 for £4. But so that was all good. And I thought brilliant. And he said you're sort of away for about 4 or 5 months. And I thought, well, at the time we were literally waiting on Monty to be born, weren't we?
No,
he was just been born. Yeah, yes. He was 4 months.
This was our second child. Yeah.
So I said, well, look, you send me the dates over, and I'll have a chat. You know. So I got home. And the email came, and I said, "Oh, I've just had a call just a minute ago. Here's the email. What do you think?" And Mandy looked at me and went, "Well, you've got to go, really, haven't you?" And I said, "Thanks very much." But we did get the money up though first, didn't we? Do you remember?
Got the money up.
Yeah, got the money up. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, that was it, and it was brilliant. We had 2 months. The New York one, we did the Met's Opera. We did 2 nights there, which was amazing at Lincoln Center.
So that was in the Metropolitan Opera House.
Yeah, they don't normally have pop ups.
No, you don't. Is that a beautiful place or what? It's one of the most beautiful opera houses. Yeah. It's just gorgeous.
4,000 seater, I think it was. Yeah.
It's that beautiful gold and burgundy. It's just a beautiful place.
Yeah, we did 2 nights, and as obviously because we were there, they got Branford Marsalis to come and do Englishman in New York as well. You know, and he's not
very cool.
He can play a bit, so yeah.
Yeah, he's a little talented.
The same with we went to Hollywood Bowl, and they got Chris Botti to come and play as well. You know, it was quite amazing. I met some amazing people.
Yeah, that's such a good experience.
It was one of those fantastic experiences. So we did 2 months there, then we went to Europe and did the same thing over there. We did it's called and on that one, Branford played on that as well. He came across for that as well for the video. Yeah, amazing, really nice guy. We had a lot of fun. And also, 3 of us went to Sting's house in Tuscany, near Florence. We went there and did a gig for his. He's got this. He started making wine. And the bottle was called Sister Moon, I think. And we played for AMET customers that flew out there to test his wine. And we basically did a function band of about 10 or 11 of his songs. And that was it. Fine. That was enough. And 3 of us lived on his estate. We were about 20 minutes from his house walk. And that was all part of his land. It was
did you get
quite huge.
Did you get some of the wine?
We did. We got a bottle.
Okay.
And I don't really. Well, yeah, I don't. I brought it back, and your mum had some, didn't you?
I think she did. Yeah.
Mandy's mum's the wine expert, if that's expert inverted commas.
She likes.
She likes a glass of wine or 3. Yeah. So she tried it out. I think it was about 45 euros a bottle. So it was quite good. You know,
I guess. Pretty good wine.
10 years ago as well.
That was 10 years ago. Yeah, he did very. I mean, he in wine circles apparently his first year was really good. But his studio was right above the winery. I don't know if you've ever seen the Sting thing just after 9/11. He did a concert the next day.
And
it's broadcast in his sort of on his patio thing. He was there in his studios there, forecourt, sorry, and that's where we did the thing. But that's where it's well worth checking that out. It's a really good concert, actually.
Yeah, I'll check it out.
Maybe he went all over Europe, didn't he? You went over.
Yeah. Oh yeah, we did. Well, you came out, didn't you? We
France, Germany.
We had a story. Our daughter Molly, she came out with when we went to Copenhagen, which was the first part of this European tour. You guys flew out. Monty was in a wheelchair, in a pram, and Molly was 2.5. And we went to catering, and the catering was amazing. I mean, the brilliant catering there. And so Molly's there trawling the tables. She's just sort of looking over the top, see where she goes. Sting was sitting down there, and she grabbed these grapes, and Sting said, "Can I have a grape?" You know, and I was. Look, Molly's looking at the grape like this, and then looking at him and looking back at the grape like that. And I'm going, give him the grape. Give him the grape.
The grape.
My career rests on this. Just give it.
Molly was like, stay away from the grapes, Sting. Stay away from the grapes. That is so funny. Such fun times, guys. You know, and Sting himself, has been very vocal and very verbal about his bipolar disorder, and has also been a big advocate for mental health as well. Let's talk just briefly, guys, about what the royal family has done for you guys in terms of mental health and mental health awareness. They've been very verbal and very vocal about it. After Prince Harry's coming out about his depression and what he's gone through after his mom passed away so many years ago. And boy, how is that continuing in the UK with their mission to bring awareness to mental health?
Well, I think, as you say, I mean, they've highlighted it, and a few years ago, the royal family would never have been so open and discuss such things at all. But as we all know, these things exist, and I think it's not just the royal family. I think the British people as a whole are not very good at discussing those things, and I always sort of feel. And correct me if I'm wrong, but this is a huge generalization. But in America, it's very okay to go and see somebody, to see to have a counselling session. Just maybe sometimes to nip something in the bud. And it's okay, and it's no kind of stigma, and it's fine if you've got whether it be marriage counselling or something that you just need to deal with. Whatever it may be. Whereas here, it's always been, nobody has talked about it, and it's very much stiff upper lip and all the rest of it. My dad lost his dad when my dad was just 11, and he was packed off to boarding school at age 8, and he was crying because his dad had just had a stroke and he didn't know what was going on. And he the headmaster said, just boys don't cry, you just I think he got the cane for it because he kept crying, and of course this is what we've been. That this is just my parents, and our parents have been in that sort of thing that you don't respond to. If you've got any kind of trauma or emotions going on, you don't really, you're not allowed to have that, and you're certainly there was no one to see. So I think what they did, it was very fundamental in actually saying, look, bottom line is everybody goes through some sort of trauma at some point in their lives. And of course, we all know we go through ups and downs in life, and we have to deal with various different things. And I think what they did was just highlight that sometimes it's hard, and that you can suffer. Of course, they had a very obvious trauma, and we all know when they lost their mom. But just the fact that they talked about it, and the fact that the aftermath of that was very difficult for them as young men. And it's okay to not be okay. I think there's that whole thing that now we are talking about that, and I think that they had a huge part to play in that. And just to say, if you've got someone that seemingly has everything, and they're saying, look, actually, I went through a period in my life where it was really tough, and I struggled with anxiety and still struggle, and depression. That it makes other young people think, well, okay, maybe I'm not the only one. I'm mad, and it's okay, and this is normal. At some point, to go through some sort of thing. So yes, it is. It is great what they've done, but I do think there needs to be more awareness. There's a lot of young people that are suffering with some sort of mental health, anxiety issues, whatever it may be, stress, which, I'm sure it did exist when we were at school, but nobody talked about it, but it just wasn't, it seemed like it didn't exist, and there was no one to go to talk to about it.
That's right.
And still now, there's a huge issue with counselling. Finding counsellors for young people in particular is very hard here, and I'm sure that maybe is a worldwide thing. I don't know, but here
it's more of a specialised thing, isn't it?
It's real specialised about finding young people's counselling and being able to deal with children and all of that. And it's a worry. Of course, the internet doesn't help. They're spending more time on the internet, and that's part of it. And I think there is more problems with it, or it's more common now than it was maybe when we were younger. Not that it didn't exist, but I think because of the rise of the internet and internet bullying and
oh yeah, there's so much that you say. I think as far as like America is concerned, I do think that we might be a bit ahead of the game when it comes to talking about it and being okay to be not okay. However, I will say that there's still a really big stigma, depending on which part you're in or what culture you're in here, that people don't talk about it much. It's still a very private kind of a thing, which and I respect the person's need for privacy and their need for confidentiality. Of course, that's a part of coming to a therapist, and that's our ethic that we can give that to those people. But in the general public, it's still a lot of times people are very shameful about having to come see a therapist because they think that something is wrong with them, or that there's something that's unforgivable about it, And so I do feel encouraged that people are. That we'll put it this way: I don't think we have to start the conversation about mental health as much as we used to, but I do think it's no time like the present to continue that conversation, to really continue to bring awareness to a topic and dispel the stigmas that go along with it. You don't have to be quote unquote crazy to see a therapist. And so many times I think in the past, because we didn't talk about it so much and it was so much swept under the rug, the only time you ever heard about it is when someone was in a crisis. So it made it look like it's only crisis and it's only for people who are acting very irrational, and which is not the case at all. And I think now that we're seeing that it's more about helping people through their life transitions and through things that they've gone through as far as grief, and of course grief itself not being pathological, but just the aftermath of the ongoing depression and anxiety that can so many times accompany that grief and continue to linger. And I think people like the royal family are so instrumental in continuing, not just for the UK but for the United States, and I think worldwide, to get people talking about it, that it is okay to not be okay. And that there is help and there is hope, and that we can become thrivers on the other side of it. And it's very encouraging, actually. That goes.
I think so.
It's really
we've come so far, haven't we, from the sort of Victorian idea that if someone was going through something, then they'd be locked up. I mean,
right.
Here, whereas now it's like, they've just had this happen and it's a hard thing, and let's work it through together, and let's get through the other side, and let's help, rather than brand them a lunatic, which is what was the case here 100 years ago, and less. 50 years ago, probably.
And here as well, so many times, I mean, you would hear about people who had, for example, schizophrenia or some of these psychotic disorders that were burned at the stake because they thought they were witches and witchcraft. And the truth of the matter is they were psychotic. They had a psychiatric illness that we needed to help to cure. But at the time, they didn't know what it was. They didn't have any idea of what was happening. And I think there's been such a growth in just the whole science behind psychology in psychiatry over the past 100 years for sure, but for sure the last 50 years it's gained so much more momentum, and there's a lot of really, really good things happening in the field now. And so we I think we owe it a lot to people who like yourselves, like like me, like whoever is willing to openly talk about it, to get the conversation, keep the conversation going. So I appreciate you guys joining me today and talking about that for sure, and talking about your experiences. And the good news is, I think I hope I'm gonna say it now. I'm gonna pull it out here, that I hope that you and I guys can collaborate more in the future to start maybe doing some things to help people find their inner voice and expressing themselves through music. So I think it's what we need to do now that we're home and we're not really doing much. We're not performing anywhere. We're not doing that aspect of things. Maybe it's our time to start giving back to people.
I think so, and I think, I mean, as you've said, as you've mentioned earlier, there's such a the music and the performing arts and the creative. There's such a correlation with that, and people connecting with that, into their deepest emotions, and it can unlock something, and it can help people on that journey to recovery, can't it? And I think, when they can pour out their own expression, in some creative way, or they hear something, it can just really help heal and transition people on. And what you said about helping people transition through something is very key, I think, in this. It's just sometimes things are for a chapter or a season. And it doesn't mean it's forever, does it? It just means we just need some help. And that's where that marvelous footprint story comes in as well. You think about footprints, and you think about the one set of footprints, and the man says, well, why is there only one set of footprints here when there were two before and two after? And then God says, well, that's when I carried you.
When I carried you, that's right.
And so God can carry us through these things, but also we can help carry each other through these times as well. And I think, that's what we need to take from this. And the performing arts and music is instrumental in that, for sure.
Well, I think we've all been to operas at one point or the other where we don't know how to speak the language. I don't speak Italian and Czech and all these things, but I can tell you, listening to some of that music and the expression and the how it just connects to your soul, brings out an emotion that you may not even realize you had. And it can be so healing itself. So sometimes music is our words when we don't know the words to speak for ourselves. And I think if we can continue to help people heal through that kind of an experience, then I think that's what we're called to do. It's almost a calling for me.
Oh, you're back.
Yeah. Well, guys, I thank you so much. I want to be respectful of your time. I could talk to you for hours and hours and hours. The other night we were on a Skype call for a couple of hours. So I want to make sure that I respect your time. But it's good to see you again, as always. It's always good to see you guys. And I thank you so much for joining me tonight.
You too, Jason. It's been great. Thank you so much for having us.
All right, guys. Well, I will talk with you all very soon.
Yeah.
Well, enjoy the CDs when they arrive eventually.
Yeah, I will. I will let you know as soon as they get here. Hopefully they'll be in the post today. We'll go see.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much, Jason.
Thank you. We'll see you
soon.
So, guys, thank you all for joining me today on this episode of Street Wrapped with some of my friends, Clive and Mandy Dunstall, who are doing tons of work over there in the UK to spread mental health and just to stay mental healthy themselves. And until we talk again next week, this is a wrap.